Every few years, the world looks at Gaza and asks the same exhausted question. Why is this still happening? The headlines change, governments release a statement calling for restraint, social media picks sides within hours, and then, inevitably, the bombs fall again. What makes this war different is not its brutality. History is full of brutality. What makes it different is this. No modern conflict has been explained more often and understood less. This is not a war that began with one attack. It is not the result of one election. It is not driven by one ideology or one leader. The Gaza-Israel war is the product of over a century of unresolved decisions, where every attempted solution quietly planted the seeds of the next disaster. To understand why Gaza burns today, you must understand why borders were drawn by foreign empires, why refugees were never allowed to return, why security becomes synonymous with survival, and why peace repeatedly collapses just when it seems closest. This story does not begin with Hamas. It does not begin with Israel. It does not even begin with Palestine. It begins with the collapse of empires after World War I, and a world that tried to fix one tragedy by creating another. Stay till the end, because this is not just history. It is the blueprint of a conflict that refuses to die. Before the 20th century, the land between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River was not a country, it was a province. For nearly 400 years, from 1517 until the World War I, this region was governed by the Ottoman Empire. There were no internationally recognized borders, no passports, no national armies defending a sovereign state. The population was mixed. Muslim Arabs formed the majority, Christian Arab communities lived throughout the region, Jewish communities existed continuously in cities such as Jerusalem, Safed, Hebron, Tiberias. This matters because it destroys a popular myth. The conflict was not inevitable. There were tensions, disputes, and occasional violence. But there was no permanent war. Identity was largely religious, local, and imperial, not nationalist. People identified as subjects of the Ottoman Empire, residents of a town, or members of a religious community. Nationalism, that idea, that land must belong to one ethnic group with exclusive sovereignty, came later, and it came from Europe. By the late 19th century, Jews across Europe faced systematic legal discrimination, violent pogroms in Eastern Europe, exclusion from political and economic life. In response, a political movement emerged, Zionism. Zionism argued that Jews as a persecuted people required a sovereign homeland to survive. Importantly, early Zionist thinkers debated multiple locations, including parts of Africa and South America. But Palestine held unmatched historical, cultural, and religious significance. Then came World War I. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. Britain and France divided much of the Middle East through secret agreements. Britain took control of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. In 1917, Britain issued a Balfour Declaration, supporting the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while simultaneously promising Arab independence elsewhere. This was not confusion. It was an imperial calculation. Britain believed it could manage contradictory promises indefinitely. Well, it could not. Between the 1920s and 1930s, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased significantly. This migration was driven by anti-Semitic violence in Eastern Europe, restrictive quotas in the Western countries, and the rise of fascism and Nazism. From the Jewish perspective, immigration meant survival. From the Arab-Palestinian perspective, it looked like demographic displacement, land loss, political marginalization in their own homeland. While land purchases were often legal, but displacement was real. Tenant farmers were removed from the land sold to Zionist institutions. Economic power began shifting rapidly. Political fears intensified. Violence followed. Riots in 1920s, a major Arab revolt from 1936 to 1939. British forces responded with mass arrests, executions, and military repression. Instead of resolving the conflict, British rule militarized it. By the time the World War II began, Palestine was already fractured, armed, and hostile. Then came the worst, the Holocaust. Between 1941 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its collaborators murdered 6 million Jews. After the war, the world faced a brutal question. Where do the survivors go? Most countries refused large-scale Jewish immigration. The United States imposed quotas. Europe lay in ruins. Palestine became the focal point of international pressure. The moral urgency created by genocide collided with the political reality of an already inhabited land. Two traumas met head-on: Jewish survival after the near extermination and the Palestinian fear of dispossession. The world treated this collision as manageable. Guess what? It was not. In 1947, Britain handed the problem to the United Nations. The UN proposed partition: one Jewish state, one Arab state, while Jerusalem under international control. At the time, Jews made up about 33% of the population. Arabs made up about 67%. Jews were allocated 55% of the land. Jewish leadership accepted the plan, seeing it as imperfect but necessary. Arab leadership rejected it, viewing it as violation of self-determination. While both decisions were rational, civil war erupted almost immediately. Partition existed on paper, violence existed on the ground. In May 1948, Israel declared independence. Neighboring Arab states invaded. Israel survived and expanded beyond the UN plan. For Palestinians, this was the Nakba, or the catastrophe. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced. More than 400 villages were destroyed or depopulated. Refugees were barred from returning. The refugee crisis was never resolved. Instead, it became permanent and hereditary. Gaza became a narrow coastal strip packed with refugees. After the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel occupied Gaza, the West Bank, and the East Jerusalem. Military rule shaped daily life, restricted movement, economic dependency, political suppression. In 2005, Israel withdrew its settlements and troops from Gaza, but Gaza remained controlled: borders, airspace, and coastline. When Hamas won Palestinian elections in 2006 and later took full control of Gaza, Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade. Gaza became isolated, economically, politically, and physically. Every peace process collapses for the same reasons, like security fears override trust, extremist violence sabotages talks, leadership lacks legitimacy, refugees remain unresolved, borders remain contested, Jerusalem remains explosive. Each failure hardens positions. Compromise becomes weakness. Fear becomes policy. Today, the Gaza Strip is home to more than 2 million people living in a territory barely 41 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide. It is one of the most densely populated places on earth. Nearly half of Gaza's population is under the age of 18. Most of them have never left Gaza. Many have never seen an airport. Some have never experienced a full day of uninterrupted electricity. They live under a reality shaped not by a single decision, but by layer upon layer of constraint. They live under a blockade that controls what enters and exits, under a governing authority that prioritizes armed resistance over civilian welfare, under constant surveillance and periodic bombardment by a far more powerful military, and under an international system that expresses concern but rarely enforces change. This is not a normal conflict zone. Gaza has no functioning economy independent of external control. Its water supply is largely undrinkable. Its healthcare system operates under chronic shortages. Its borders are effectively sealed during war and barely open during peace. For civilians, there is no safe choice. They cannot flee freely. They cannot vote out their rulers in meaningful elections. They cannot shield themselves from retaliation carried out in the name of security or resistance. When violence erupts, civilians are not simply caught in the middle. They are the terrain on which the conflict is fought. Civilian suffering in Gaza is not the result of a single bad day policy or a single immoral decision. It is the predictable outcome of prolonged occupation, failed statehood, militarized resistance, and security-first approach that treats containment as a substitute for resolution. This is why every escalation looks familiar, because nothing structural has changed. This war was not continued for more than 70 years because peace is impossible. It has continued because every attempt at peace avoided the hardest issues. History was never repaired, it was frozen. The events of 1948 were never mutually acknowledged. One side remembers independence, the other side remembers catastrophe. The refugee crisis was never resolved. Millions of Palestinians remain stateless not because of solutions don't exist, but because every solution threatens someone's definition of justice. Security replaced reconciliation. Military deterrence replaced political courage. Walls, checkpoints, and blockades replaced trust. And over time, fear hardened into doctrine. For Israel, fear is rooted in centuries of persecution, genocide, and the belief that weakness invites annihilation. For Palestinians, fear is rooted in displacement, occupation, and the belief that compromise invites erasure. Both fears are real, both fears are historically grounded, and both fears now prevent the very peace they were meant to secure. This conflict does not survive because people love war. It survives because acknowledging the full pain of the other side feels like surrender. Peace would require Israelis to accept that Palestinian suffering is not incidental. Palestinians to accept that Israel is not a temporary mistake, and the international community to enforce solutions instead of managing crisis. That is the step no one has been willing to take. If you have stayed till the end, you witnessed how unresolved trauma becomes permanent conflict, and why until that trauma is confronted honestly, this war will continue to pass itself from one generation to the next. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.